on UTV.
Lesser Spotted Journeys, proudly sponsored by Glens of Antrim Potatoes.
Crossing over this bridge will bring you from the entrance to Tempo Manor Estate into the village itself. And right away, you'll be in what local people have always called the Diamond. McKeagneys were building coaches and traps and carts and turning out high-class carpentry here some 30 years before the manor house had even been built. And from 1965 onwards, this is where Johnny McKeagney ran his grocery shop. Well, this is where he was supposed to be running his grocery shop. But as often as not, as his wife Teresa will tell you, Johnny would be absent from his post, allegedly making some delivery up the country, all the while colloguing with some old fella, with mapping pen and sketchbook in hand, getting material methodically, painstakingly, for what would turn out to be his magnum opus. A truly remarkable record of a life well spent, reflecting Johnny McKeagney's fascination with the history, archaeology, commerce and folklore of his beloved Tempo and the Fermanagh countryside around. One of the great joys of this book is that Johnny's work has not been processed and proofed and printed as a conventional book. This is a reproduction of what he created with his own gifted hands. Well, listen, somebody gave me a copy of this a few years back. Yes. I don't know exactly when, and I remember receiving it and opening it up, and it was, at the time, it really impressed me. And I thought, when the more I looked at it, the more I read it, this is one of the most remarkable books I have ever seen.
In the beginning, when we started the shop in December 1965, there was a lot of older people living around here, and he was a real people's person, and he used to love chatting them, and they used to tell him stories, and he used to pull out the wee biscuit bags. At that time you could sell broken biscuits by the pound, and he used to pull out these wee biscuit bags.
Just a paper bag?
A wee white biscuit bag, and write the story down on it, and here they were lying all around the place, and I wasn't even allowed to tidy them up or anything. And then I bought him a book after Christmas came, and I bought him a notebook, and that was the start of it.
And I suppose after a while, people would know that he was interested, and
everyone knew him.
Right.
And he would sail off out of the shop and leave me with the shop.
We're getting to it now, aren't we?
You're getting to it now when I could kill him.
Okay. I mean, he was off doing books and doing all
enjoying himself,
all of this,
and I was.
But I was going to say, Teresa, I was going to ask you, I mean, when did he get the time to do this? Because he was supposed to be running the shop at the same time. But he
dodged off every minute he could get.
Get away.
And I would be raging. And I'd be maybe further down the shop serving somebody, and somebody would come in there and way off. He could slip away ever so quietly.
Without you noticing. But he knew where he was at. In other words, if she sees me, I'll not be allowed to go out. But he'd be away doing this.
He would.
I mean, he wasn't away idling or going to the bookies or fishing.
Oh, never.
He was doing this here.
Never. He was always doing this. He was always.
Right. Did you have a hand in any of this? Did he share it with you as he was doing it, or?
He did. He shared it with me because he wasn't a good speller.
Right.
And I don't know how many times I spelled chapel for him. He could never remember whether it was L-E or E-L.
Right. So you had to sort of proofread his stuff and make sure he got it right.
I think I did that printing there. I think it was me did that.
Did you do that beautiful?
I think I did. Yeah.
Proper plate? That's
At that time I could do the italic. But I haven't done it for years now, but I did that. There was different wee bits and L's and M's he allowed me to do.
He allowed you to do, that's what I was going to say. But isn't that a nice way of involving you in this work as well? You'd have preferred if he was more involved in the shop work as well at the same time. Right. But then you might not have had this, Teresa.
I definitely wouldn't have,
I mean, every page you open is just a wonder.
Even as each year goes past, I realise how precious it is, what a precious source of knowledge it is to all the young ones coming up, because they used to come asking him for history about Tempo and what it was like long ago, but it's all there in the museum for them now because we're giving all this stuff into the museum.
mean,
And Enniskillen, that is.
it is. I mean, apart from it being a labour of obvious love on his part, it is a formidable body of knowledge. I mean, there's an awful lot of anything from folklore to local history, every aspect of the history of the place you can imagine. He sadly died very shortly after this was published. Yes. He lived to see it published, at least.
He did. 5 weeks after it was published, he died. Quite suddenly, really, although he wasn't in good health. And I should have realised, you know, but he had different times he'd gone into hospital very sick, but he always got over it and came home again. And
only 5 weeks.
And those 5 weeks, he was extremely happy. And somebody said, "Johnny, how are you?" And he says, "You see every cloud up there? I'm just sitting up there."
But he must have felt, and I'm sure you all felt, an enormous sense of achievement.
Oh, I felt very proud.
To see this coming
I felt so proud of him.
And all those hours that you were giving off about him in the shop when he was away doing it, nearly worthwhile, was it?
Suddenly worthwhile.
Johnny McKeagney's book, In the Isle to Go, first published in 2010, is now in its 3rd edition, and may also be viewed in such august surroundings as the Library of Congress in Washington and in the libraries of Harvard and several other American universities. But there's yet another very tangible aspect to Johnny's legacy, which is now on view to anyone passing through the village of Tempo. The inspiration for the stone circle can be traced back to the slightly oddly named Topped Mountain nearby. That seems to be a translation of an oddly non-distinctive Irish name, Mullynock, which means simply the summit of a hill. The name is most likely derived from the massive cairn on top of the mountain. In archaeological terms, the site of an important early Bronze Age burial, and in rambling terms, a wonderful vantage point whence to view vast tracts of Fermanagh and Tyrone in the distance. For both reasons, Johnny McKeagney was fond of rambling in the environs of Topped Mountain, but I suspect he found the climb increasingly tough going. So he devised a scheme to bring some of the mountain a bit closer to home. His book contains an account of how the stone circle was built by fairy folk, but there is an alternative version which claims that it was built by tempo folk, like Carol Graham.
He certainly had done his research because he had walked miles over hills and dales, and he had located some nice stones.
But he came back down from the mountain. And he said,
Something like that.
I've had a vision of these stones, you know.
Yes.
The local people will say, is he off his head or what? Well, what was the reaction?
I suppose it certainly was. And how are we going to get... I mean, because he was talking big stones,
well,
you know,
just look.
The tradition of giants' graves and different things.
Yes.
He certainly was talking big stones. He wasn't into something that you could put in a bag and carry down. So there was going to be a lot of prep work, and there was going to be a lot of work.
But the point is, I mean, but people said, they were willing.
Yes, they were willing, because I suppose the idea was... A lovely idea, an entrance to Tempo. I think that was a nice thought.
Aye.
I'm sure people are driving past and they don't really know, were they there,
well, I can
X
tell
years
you,
ago?
I can tell you, I've been driving through Tempo for, well, I don't know, I'm sure 20, 30 years or something like that. And I couldn't tell you when they were there.
You first noticed?
And I thought, were they always there?
Yeah.
And that's the thing about them, isn't it? Because they look as if they've been here for
Yes.
a couple of thousand years.
I mean, they've blended well in.
So it's here about roughly 20 years, we reckon, just over 20 years.
Just over 20 years.
And it's only in its infancy, because
Absolutely.
it'll be here long after you and I
I hope so.
have to depart
I hope so.
the place, I'm sure. Oh, it will.
I hope so indeed.
Next 1,000 years. And there'll be all sorts of stories of how it got here.
Yes, it'll be probably dramatised a wee bit more and a bit more added to it, but there'll always be the little people involved, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I'm not good at guessing weights, but I would imagine like some of those must weigh very near a ton.
Well,
or maybe more.
absolutely.
I just don't know.
Absolutely.
So you had a lot of help, and you had to get sort of heavy machinery to get them down from the mountain.
and got them strapped on, onto the back of some of the trailers and link boxes, and it was a fair, it was a fair descent from the hillside as well. You
And
know,
it was all done by sort of voluntary
Yes,
labour and all
yes,
the rest, and just the
yes.
community gathering around and doing
absolutely,
it.
and of course the best bit is then to sit and have your tea and sandwiches, sitting on the hillside, looking around, admiring the view.
Yeah, well, I
So
mean,
it was good.
it's not unlike a community would have been doing about 3,000 years, 4,000 years
Yes,
ago. You know,
yes.
let's build a stone circle.
Yes,
This
and get on with
then
it.
They didn't have JCBs and
That's right.
excavators and all
That's
the
right.
rest of it.
It
and
was
so
a bit
on.
more difficult, you know,
Yeah.
but
Well, I've been counting them. There's 12 of them.
yes.
Was that significant at all?
No,
Or just-
not in my memory. No,
Aye.
no, it was
Just like a clock, in other
yes,
words.
yes,
Yeah.
And maybe it was easier to put them, you know, thinking about sort of almost the clock and the 12 sort of
Well,
even
now that the
sized.
sun has just come out and you start
Yes.
to see the shadows, you think,
Yes.
oh, I wonder is there any significance to how they were placed or anything like that?
No,
you know?
I don't think it was as technical as that now.
You don't get out here in the summer solstice or anything like
No,
that and do
no,
all
and
sorts of
climb about
ceremonies.
ceremonies. No, no.
Lesser Spotted Journeys, proudly sponsored by Glens of Antrim Potatoes.
Come on, team. Off to work.
Let's do it together.
It's a plant coming in. Crack on. That's more like it. Off to work for a brand new series of Love Your Garden.
Wednesday at 8 on UTV.